for inviting me here today. I do have a confession to make after hearing all these great speeches. I'm not an anthropologist. I'm not a neurologist. Actually, the confession is, when I was like 10 or 12 years old, I called myself a Disneytologist. And I wrote him a letter. I made my own letterhead with a markerless flare pen, and I sent him the whole letter and everything with suggestions for rides and everything. And their legal team came back and said with a cease and desist. You can't call yourself a Disneytologist. We own that somehow. I don't think they really owned it, but they came after me. So I called them and said, hey, I got an idea for a ride. They said, well, anything you can think of, we've already thought of, so don't call us anymore. So I responded by making a scale model of Disneyland, and this little picture my mom took of me. Of course, I wasn't expert in fashion or hair design at the time. My friends thought I would be mugging clowns in the parking lot or something. But, that was a little model I made by taking business cards from local businesses and grabbing them and going home and cutting them with little X-Acto blades and building this. So I was a completely obsessed child. You might say I was a victim of this. And contrary to the video, it's funny, I just saw that myself. When I was 5 years old, I can tell you where I was standing when I told another kid that I wanted to be the guy that thought of rides for Disneyland. That's what I wanted to do. And I was so fortunate because all that, slaps in the face kind of made me more determined, made me more passionate about wanting to be a Disney Imagineer, someone who creates and designs and works with a beautiful team of very, very smart people to create those adventures that you see at the parks. I left Disney in 2000, not because I didn't love Disney. I felt I learned something, some kind of a process I almost couldn't define. And I wanted to take it, I guess like one of those multi-potentialities or something, take it out into the real world and just do other things with it. How could I create these sort of experiences? So a friend said, well, what you really are is an experiential designer. And this is like before ad agencies picked up on that phrase. And I said, well, okay, but I don't even know what that is. So I thought maybe we would all go together kind of on the journey I took to figure out what was I doing? So we look in the dictionary, it says, what is an experience? And so, yes, it is sensory. It's this apprehension of all these things, just like we're experiencing in this room right now, temperature, light, sound, so forth. But see how it says a child's first experience of snow? So granted, I thought, well, let's just think about that. Let's observe. That's one thing good designers do. You observe a lot. Let's just see how sensory, they don't even call it snow, do they? They call it winter wonderland. That's how good it is, right? So this is some family, I've admitted, another confession, some family pictures. So the very first thing of snow, let's just take our collective mind into snow for a moment and just imagine what we did when we were a kid, when we first went, and can you almost hear the crunch, through the snow, right? The first picture I found in the roll, you got to taste it. Now, that takes a lot of trust, doesn't it? You just put that in your mouth, but feel the cold, the temperature. What I love about snow, too, is no designer in a man-made world can do detail like you find in the beautiful, the creation of a snowstorm. Because one snowflake on one glove, isn't it different than the one on the next? The world just gets fractally more beautiful every moment. The other funny thing was there was all these pictures of them making snowmen and making snow things. I think, well, this has got to be endemic to experiences. Don't we want to invest in it, to make something out of it, to plant a flag on the moon and bring home moon rocks? I mean, don't we just do that as people? So there's a lot to, even at Disney World, people will buy their name on a brick out in front of the park just to prove that they cleaned out their bank account there, I guess. No, I'm joking. People love that. Anyway, they invest in that. I know. Well, they're a client of mine, so I can't. Anyway, so they want to invest in these things. And when you think about investing, it's true. You look at online virtual reality, very much of an experiential parallel. People in Minecraft, aren't we building things? Are we making things? It's true. We have to invest. You want to trade the weapons in Warcraft, whatever it is that you're doing. And of course, just like me leaving Bermuda here, I hate for this to end. It's so gorgeous. But the better the experience is, the more you hate for that thing to be over, right? And of course, this is where all the money is the souvenirs, right? All the t-shirt shops along Front Street and all these different places that you'll go, people want to take that pine cone. And of course, those moon rocks that were for scientific purposes, that was souvenirs. They're at the museum. We can all touch them, right? It's kind of funny. But how many of us have gone on vacation to the same place more than once in our life. The parents are like, well, we're going back to Yellowstone this year. Well, isn't it true? It's because it's predictable. It becomes a ritual. Emotionally, everything in the senses came together. The snow, the cold, the temperature, the crunch, the smell of pine, it all makes for a very powerful experience. That's why nature is pretty timeless. It's very repeatable, isn't it? Aren't these national parks, even the beautiful beaches that I visited here, were very, very much part of a story I could take with me. So without being a scientist, okay, or anything like that, you have all these inputs as a designer. So I would look at this and say, well, here's all these different inputs. Because most companies hire an architect, or they hire an interiors firm, or they hire one type of discipline. But who's thinking of the total picture? Well, an Imagineer does. Imagineers, we kind of try to think of that total picture of everything. And that creates a perception or a reality to it. It's an artificial reality, but you could even tune a real place. You ever been to a restaurant and everything's great about it, but the lighting? I hope it's not the food, but if it's the lighting, you're lucky, right? Or it's just too noisy. You go with people you don't like, so you don't have to talk to them because it's so nice and noisy in the restaurant. Great, you're great. So that's, love you, yeah. So, so great. Anyway, Disneyland is just as a good example, a case study. And of course, there's real fortresses and real museums and real places that you can take and do tours and create great experiences from. But let's just take Disneyland as a system of experience, because I'm thinking like these things, like we heard about the cell, that these are systems, they are networks. And one of the great things about this is a very old picture of Disneyland from the 50s. And what's interesting about it is you might notice that there's a little ring around it. Well, that's a berm, 20-foot wall of dirt. And we only have $17 million and 55 to build a park. That's a lot of the money. Why? Why would you do that? You want to keep the outside world out because the only place you can enter is through those portals under that berm to come in. There's a railroad station above it. And you say, well, wow, that's kind of weird. Well, Walt Disney, like a movie studio, wanted to keep the outside world out. It's a very important point. So this immersion, really could eliminate the outside world. Now, what does that do to you? How does that change us when we think about that outside world? Well, this is a plaque that they Walt actually put, above this portal as you enter into Disneyland, so you knew, kind of like putting a virtual reality headset on, that you were leaving the world of today and entering all of these other worlds. So it's like a movie theater. But instead of finding seats and sticky soda on the floor and a big screen, he got rid of all of that. You just step into the movie. You step into another time, another world, another subject. Look at the posters there on the wall. Those are almost like posters to coming attractions of other experiences or other movies. So as experiential designer, you're almost creating a movie backwards, except you're the actors in the movie, but we're putting you into a scene where we're dropping you into a world where everything you touch conforms to a particular time period. It so happens as you enter, that's Main Street, that would be an area of the 1890s. But what is immersion, or this idea of immersion, which we use in virtual reality and so many different things? What does it do for you? And of course, since I'm not a scientist, I chose the most relevant map right there. The idea is that when you come into these worlds and all the detail looks like 1890, there's no window air conditioner up there to distract you hanging out of the window. Pretty much you start to forget about your troubles. That's what you're paying $100 for, is you can kind of lower your guard. Even advertising messages, things like this that are framed in this environment are kind of perceived a little bit differently by guests. They almost like it better because it's wrapped in this much more positive and optimistic environment. You won't get a jaywalking ticket by crossing the street, right? So pretty much you start shutting down a little bit of your worries. They say more people get injured in theme parks. They fall off the curbs and things because they just sort of leave their mind at home. They're just wandering. Hey, where's the haunted house? So they want to do that. So all these things kind of happen, right? So all this detail, though, but your mind keeps looking for what's wrong. Well, am I still in 1890? Oh, there's the Visa sign there. No, I'm not. So you might see all those things. But when I asked one of these senior Imagineers that work with Walt, I go, well, what are we really trying to achieve here? And, you can always add dancing penguins. You can add all that kind of stuff in there. But you're trying to give people the permission to be a child again. I remember I worked on Disneyland Paris, and I was very worried that the French would be very, very, very antagonistic to the park. No, it was in a class system. They felt like kids again. Maybe they became that way when they left, but they certainly were that way when they were inside the park. And they fell in love with it. And so that's part of it. But the one sense that requires artists and creative people and ideas Yeah, beyond this processor system is the one little sense of the mind's eye. What do you aspire to be? What do you wish you were? So now we've created this world, but how do we pick which world for it to be that all of you would like to come visit? Because the 1890s was great in 1955 when it was nostalgia, but it's really not that anymore. But to make these worlds seamless, I remember sitting on a bench and watching how fast people moved and how fast they walked and the speed of the horses on the horse and drawn streetcars, and never picking music to play in the background that was faster or slower, like scoring a movie backwards. You take that level of detail, that level of concern. So now you look at the tempo there, dun, 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 kind of a waltz. That's what you put in there. So you'd find that tempo to make it reassuring. So those are the kind of things you think about. Or even look at the video here. Even the sound of a car horn has to fit 1890. All that's engineered. All of it's thought about. And I talked right over it. But anyway, all those kind of sounds you have. But everything matters. I guess that's the point here. All of this matters. But there you heard it. It's a system of story as well, because the content has to hold together. People from another country might see this, and it doesn't mean anything to them. So the content has to be relevant to reach the guest or reach the audience. Also, you think of like the memories of what it's like to be a kid. Didn't the giant lollipops look bigger when you were 6? Didn't everything look bigger when you were 6? Well, Main Street, of course, is about things being handmade. It's the 1890s. So even the smell of candy is blown through those, isn't that evil? Through those little vents right there. My wife, if I go by myself, I always have to bring fudge back or something back, and it's just because of things like this, and everything just tastes better at Disneyland. But that's just the way it is. So now you say, well, what is that right story? How do we look to that? How do creative people do some of those things? Well, a lot of it is about what we dream of. And so I met a man, everything I've learned, I've gotten from other people. It's not from me. David Bradley, this is the man. You're not going to believe this. He owned the Kittyland, the celebrity Kittyland in Beverly Hills Walt took his kids to. And every actor and actress took their kids there. And this man owned the Kittyland, and Walt would look at the kiddie rides long before there was a Disneyland. And so I worked with this guy when he was very old, and he was a wonderful man. And he said, he had met Mr. Disney. I said, well, what did Walt ask you? I got to know what you guys talked about, right? I want to know. And he says, he asked me what I would do if I had all the money in the world, those stupid questions like that. And he goes, I don't have all the money. I'm running a Kittyland for, Walt had ended up with all the money in the world. So finally, Dave Bradley gave Walt some advice, and me too, and sort of said, the best rides are the ones that happen to you. And of course, in the advertising world, we talk about storytelling. Your deodorant will have a story to tell. I mean, it's storytelling, advertising. Okay, well, what are these stories? Well, the stories aren't what we preach at you in the park. It's what you take away to tell someone else, that you survived something exciting. So in Bradley's office, he still had copies of these old sketches of some of these early Disneyland rides that happened to you, where you experienced something. So Peter Pan, that has a huge line. Go there today at Disney World, Disneyland, you'll see a huge line there. Why? Why do you guess? Don't we wish we could fly over London? Not circle over London, just fly over London, right? And then, of course, there's the line. I took these photos myself the same day, and that's the line for Snow White, where you get chased around by the witch, Okay. Right, exactly. And so, there's the you can fly or you can die, right? You can get either one. So it's funny. Now, of course, my favorite ride as a little boy was this one, which was you can drive. It's Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, where it's about Grand Theft Auto, and then you get run over by a train and go to hell. That was the Disney story they were telling there. So if you can survive that, you can survive anything. But that was the story of the Mr. Toad ride. So you can see the popularity of things that people dream. Other ones are rites of passage. You ever wonder why roller coasters are exciting? Well, fear minus death equals fun. So if you're an 8-year-old boy or girl and you say, hey, Daddy, I conquered the Matterhorn. The fear is riding up the lift. And we put music on Space Mountain, and we put the scariest, most anxiety-driven music you could imagine going up the lift because you're saying, why did I do this? I don't want to go on this thing. My kids, and then you go over it and you have a lot of fun and you survive it. So a lot of it is about surviving and thriving and kids getting to conquer mountains and just wonderful things like that. But these environments are so compelling. They're so powerful. We end up buying those hats with the ears on them. Are you going to wear that at home? Who wears that at home? I don't wear that at home. I didn't wear it there either, but those are the kind of things that people imagine. But those are things that satisfy people's needs. And you feel compelled to be part of it. So even someone that's in a wheelchair, or someone who may not fit in the real world the way they'd like to, or they can't achieve their dreams, can come to a different place and they can be part of it. And that's what's really important. So this one gentleman that I worked with, who was a kind of Walt's best illustrator, his name was Herbert Ryman. He told me that he was walking with Mr. Disney in the dirt at Disneyland, and so what should I do over here? And Walt said, well, just do something people will like. He goes, what? Thank you for nothing. What do you mean people will like? What he meant was satisfy people's needs, figure out what people really want emotionally and give it to them, And so there's Mr. Ryman there. And he was a wonderful, wonderful artist for Walt Disney. And he had that essence. He understood how to reach people. And that was really what's the most important thing. So this is what I was thinking about when you say people get the little ears, they get the little hat. And that's what touches me at Disneyland, is seeing a place that, whether it's Disneyland or maybe it's an environment that you're in control of, that you can make more inclusive and be able to let people hold on to a piece of it in their own way and have a little bit of that dream. But here's some quick takeaways. One, let's try to take that dream. Let's figure out what people and ourselves are interested in and really try to create it for them, whether it's a museum. That's more of what I work on now. It's not theme parks. It's other environments making things more interesting or solving them. But to be a good observer. Sense if that restaurant has the lighting too bright. If it's yours, take it down, change it. Be willing to explore those things. Being imaginative and dreaming outside the box. Don't just do what other people have done. There's a reason people have copied Disneylands and they've never worked, because that edge wasn't there. Going further wasn't there. Exciting, we got to give people a story to tell. Don't hold back. Make sure you have the splash down at the end of the Matterhorn ride, right? You got to give them that. I'm a nut for detail and immersing people in those beautiful little details. In Disneyland Paris, we realized how long people would wait for the parade to sit on the curb. So we said, why don't we go to the Smithsonian and get the most beautiful cast iron manhole covers we can from all different American cities and put them there in the streets. When people are looking, it's an art installation of beautiful iron designs. And sure enough, those iron designs were there. So all those little things show passion. They show you care. They show you that you're going farther. And so every little detail, like that snowflake on your finger, goes further and further. But, my favorite Walt Disney quote has to do with inspiration. And we kind of meet a lot of people saying no. It's kind of a world of no out there. And we also have a world of pain out there, too, that when they come into another environment, whether it's a virtual reality or not, why can't we make that an environment that looks to the better nature of people? That's what attracted me to want to be an Imagineer in the first place. Build people up. Do what you can to do that. But maybe you take this quote away. I love it. It's kind of fun to do the impossible, isn't it? Because the impossible is just a temporary word until you make it possible. So as long as you see it as a checkpoint and not a barrier, that's fun. So whatever you have out there that you can turn into a system of experience, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Thank you.